The wind carries dust tonight, curling it around the sagebrush and low hills like ghostly hands. Out here in the west, sound travels strangely. Sometimes, a rider can hear the crack of a rifle from 10 miles off. Other times, even his own horse's hooves vanish into silence. And in this silence, something stirs. You probably won't sleep soundly after this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'm always curious who's out there keeping me company in these late hours. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins with a cowboy named Caleb Hart, riding alone across the open plains. He isn't the kind of man who leaves much behind, just dust on the trail and a reputation for being both stubborn and a little too soft-hearted for the brutal West. His hat is bent from weather, his boots scarred from miles of rough country. He carries with him not just a rifle and saddlebag, but an ache that most men cover with whiskey. Historians still argue whether the 1880s marked the true twilight of the cowboy era, or if that decline came later with barbed wire and railroads. But for men like Caleb, the golden days are already slipping away. Work is scarce, land is fenced, and sometimes a man rides just to remember what freedom feels like. He reaches a river crossing at dusk, a narrow stretch of water glinting like melted silver beneath the fading sky. His horse, Dusty, dips its head to drink, and Caleb swings down to fill his canteen. That's when he notices movement on the far bank. At first he thinks it's a deer, graceful, poised, but then the figure straightens. It's a woman, tall and proud, with black hair catching the last streaks of sunlight like a raven's wing. She wears a fringed deerskin dress, decorated with beads that shimmer faintly even at this distance, and she's not alone. Her bow is slung casually across her shoulder, and one hand rests on the hilt of a knife at her belt. Caleb freezes, water dripping from his canteen. Encounters between settlers and the Lakota, yes, that's her people, though he doesn't know it yet, are rarely friendly. But instead of vanishing into the trees, the woman stands her ground, watching him. There's no fear in her eyes, only a challenge. He raises one hand slowly, palm open, the universal sign of peace. She tilts her head slightly, as if amused by his effort. A hawk cries overhead, wheeling across the river, and the sound seems to hang in the air between them. Here's a quirky detail most folks don't know. Some Lakota women carried small carved charms shaped like hawks or owls, believing the bird spirits could reveal truth in uncertain moments. Whether or not she wears such a charm, Caleb can't tell, but the hawk's timing feels like judgment. Finally, she speaks. Her English is accented but steady. "You crossed land not yours." Her words strike sharper than her knife could. Caleb lowers his hand but doesn't retreat. "I'm just passing through. Watering my horse, nothing more." The woman studies him, her eyes dark as the river stones. After a moment, she nods once, but she doesn't lower her guard. Caleb feels something stir, an odd mix of relief and, well, something else. Attraction? Maybe. Or maybe it's just the way the loneliness of the plains makes every human face burn brighter. The sun slips lower, painting the water blood red. Caleb knows he should mount up and ride, but instead, he lingers. There's a strange pull here, as if the river itself is daring him to step closer. And though neither of them knows it yet, this single crossing, this accidental meeting at the water's edge, will bind their fates tighter than any rope or chain. Caleb finally tips his hat. "Thank you for letting me pass." The woman doesn't reply. She simply turns, walking back into the shadows of the trees. The beads on her dress catch one last flicker of light, then vanish. Caleb mounts Dusty, but for the first time in months, his thoughts don't wander back to debts or fences or the slow death of the open range. Instead, he thinks about her. The proud stance, the fire in her eyes, the unspoken challenge that made him feel alive. He rides on, not knowing her name, but already certain this was no ordinary encounter. And as the coyotes begin their mournful chorus across the plain, the West itself seems to whisper, "This story is just beginning." Night settles over the plains like a heavy quilt, stitched with stars and the pale glow of a restless moon. Caleb rides on, the memory of the woman by the river clinging to him tighter than the dust on his clothes. He makes camp beneath a cottonwood, coaxing a small fire to life with dried brush and a handful of twigs. The flames crackle, throwing orange sparks that drift into the night like tiny fireflies. He leans back against his saddle, chewing on a strip of jerky that tastes mostly of salt and regret. The face of the woman won't leave him. Not her name, not her voice, not even the way she stood with her hand resting on that knife, half warning, half invitation. Here's a historical fact worth noting. By the late 19th century, most tribes in the Great Plains had been pushed onto reservations, often by broken treaties and military force. But pockets of freedom still existed, especially near the Black Hills, where the Lakota fought hardest to keep their land. It's possible, some historians say, that the woman Caleb saw belonged to one of those groups, refusing to yield. Living as her ancestors had for centuries, Caleb pokes at the fire with a stick, muttering to himself, "What's a man supposed to do with that?" He isn't the kind to chase after strangers, especially those who might put an arrow in his back. Yet the thought of never seeing her again scratches at him worse than the cactus spines he once pulled from his leg. Somewhere out in the dark, an owl calls. A lesser-known detail about these plains owls. Settlers sometimes believed their hoots carried messages from lost souls. Caleb chuckles softly. "Well, if you've got a message, old bird, I'll take it. Just make sure it's not about me dying in my sleep." The night stretches on. He drifts into uneasy dreams, shapes moving through tall grass, a woman's voice calling his name, though she's never learned it. Morning comes sharp and golden. The air smells of sage and dust, and Caleb saddles up Dusty with the kind of weariness that comes from both travel and questions left unanswered. He rides west, toward a line of red cliffs that rise like jagged teeth against the horizon. It's near noon when he spots movement again. This time, no mistake, it's her. The woman from the river, standing on a ridge above, her hair whipping in the dry wind. She doesn't run, doesn't hide. Instead, she descends, slowly, every step measured, as though testing whether fate truly intends to cross their paths twice. Caleb dismounts, holding Dusty's reins. "Didn't expect to see you again." Her gaze lingers on him, assessing. Then almost reluctantly she speaks. "You ride careless." Many eyes watch. The warning carries weight. Caleb feels the prickling between his shoulders, that familiar sense of being hunted. He glances at the horizon, half expecting to see warriors riding down upon him. But the land is empty, save for wind and grass. "Name's Caleb," he says, breaking the tension. After a pause, she replies, "Ayoka." The name rolls like music, soft yet strong. It means she brought happiness, though Caleb won't learn that until much later. Their conversation stumbles forward, pieced together from short words and long silences. She asks why he rides alone. He shrugs, admitting he's chasing work that rarely comes. She tells him the river is sacred, a place where spirits listen more closely than men. Caleb nearly makes a joke about needing all the spirits he can get, but something in her tone silences him. Respect matters here, even to a wanderer like him. Historians still argue whether love at first sight is just a romantic invention or something people truly experienced in such harsh times. But watching Ayoka in the shifting sunlight, Caleb begins to believe it's real enough, real and dangerous. They part again before the sun drops, Ayoka vanishing into the folds of the land like she was never there. Caleb rides on, but he feels marked, branded by that encounter, haunted by her name, Ioka. It lingers in his mind like a song he can't stop humming. That night, as he makes camp once more, he catches himself scanning the darkness, listening for her steps instead of coyotes. And for the first time in years, he's not entirely certain he wants to keep riding alone. The prairie rolls out like an endless sea, tall grass swaying under the late afternoon sun. Caleb guides Dusty along a faint trail, though out here, trail is a generous word. It's more like the suggestion of a path, worn by hooves and wagon wheels that passed months, maybe years before. His canteen swings against the saddle, half empty, but thirst isn't what gnaws at him. It's the memory of Ioka. He tries to shake it, tells himself it was just a passing meeting, no more important than a cloud drifting by. Yet the way she spoke, the way her eyes seemed to hold secrets older than the land itself, those things don't leave a man so easily. By dusk, Caleb spots smoke on the horizon. Not the thick black kind that means trouble, but a thin, steady line rising from a fire carefully tended. He nudges Dusty closer, cautious but curious. As he approaches, the shapes of teepees emerge, tucked against a grove of cottonwoods. A small village. Children's laughter drifts on the breeze, mixed with the low murmur of voices and the smell of stew simmering in a pot. Caleb reins in his horse, keeping to the shadows. He knows better than to ride in uninvited. Then, like the answer to an unspoken prayer, Ioka appears. She carries a bundle of sticks, her braids swinging against her back. When she sees him, her steps falter, just for a heartbeat. Then she resumes her calm stride. She doesn't wave him over, doesn't smile, but her eyes flicker with recognition. Caleb feels like a boy again, caught staring at something he shouldn't. He dismounts, keeping his hands visible, a silent gesture of respect. "Didn't mean to intrude," he says softly. Ioka studies him, then nods toward the edge of the grove. "Wait there." Her tone isn't unkind, but it leaves no room for debate, so Caleb waits. He leans against Dusty, watching the camp. A group of men sits in a circle, their conversation serious, though every now and then one of them glances his way. The weight of those stares presses on him heavier than a saddlebag of rocks. Here's a historical fact. By the 1880s, most native communities had faced relentless pressure to assimilate. Boarding schools, forced dress codes, even bans on traditional ceremonies. Yet many resisted quietly, keeping their languages and rituals alive under the eyes of officials who wanted them erased. Seeing this village, alive with tradition, Caleb realizes he's witnessing something rare, resilience made flesh. Time passes before Ioka returns. She carries a small clay bowl, steam rising from its contents. She sets it on a flat rock near him. "Eat." Caleb glances down at the stew, corn, beans, bits of venison, and his stomach growls loud enough to betray him. "Much obliged," he mutters, crouching to take a bite. It's the best thing he's tasted in weeks, though he keeps that admission quiet. While he eats, Ioka sits across from him, her gaze steady. "Why do you ride alone?" Caleb chews slowly, buying time. He could give her the easy answer, that cowboys are loners by nature, that the road suits him better than a roof. But the truth sits heavier. "Lost most of what I had," he says finally. "Home, family. Figured it's easier not to get tied down again." She tilts her head, considering. Easier is not always stronger. The words land sharper than he expects. He laughs quietly, more to cover the sting than anything else. "Guess you're right." A quirky detail worth noting. Some frontier cowboys carried lockets or scraps of ribbon from women they barely knew, talismans against loneliness. Caleb carries no such trinket, but he begins to suspect Ayoka's voice will serve the same purpose. Etched in his mind, steady as the beat of a drum. Night gathers. The village settles into quiet rhythms, fires glowing, songs rising low and melodic. Caleb doesn't join, but he listens, the sound weaving into his bones. He feels both like an outsider and like someone on the edge of belonging. Historians still argue whether interactions like this, between cowboys and native communities, were rare exceptions or more common than records suggest. Most official accounts lean toward conflict. But the truth, Caleb suspects, is more complicated. Maybe people found ways to bridge divides, if only for a moment. When it's time to leave, Ayoka stands, brushing dust from her hands. The trail west is dangerous, she warns. Not just from thirst or wolves. Men, too. Caleb rises, tipping his hat. Danger and I are old friends. She doesn't smile, but her eyes soften just enough. Then she turns back toward the camp, disappearing into the firelight. As Caleb rides away beneath a silvered sky, he realizes something undeniable. For the first time in years, the trail ahead doesn't feel empty. It feels like it might lead somewhere. Dawn paints the prairie in strokes of pale gold, long shadows stretching across the grasslands. Caleb stirs awake beneath his blanket, the night's chill still clinging to his bones. Dusty grazes nearby, ears twitching at every sound. The cowboy rubs his eyes, thinking of Ayoka's warning. Men, too. He figures she meant outlaws, maybe bounty hunters. Still, the tone of her voice lingers, like a tune he can't shake. He breaks camp quickly, but the day feels different. The air hums with tension, like a bowstring pulled taut. By midday, he spots riders on the horizon, 3 of them, moving steady, not fast. He tips his hat low and adjusts his rifle in the saddle scabbard. Best to be ready, though he knows trouble usually comes when you least expect it. He turns south, giving them distance. But by evening, he can't shake the feeling he's being followed. Dusty senses it too, snorting uneasily. Caleb rides until darkness swallows the prairie, finally finding shelter in a small ravine. He decides to wait it out. Somewhere nearby, a coyote howls. Then faintly, he hears something else, the rhythmic beat of a drum. It carries across the land, steady as a heartbeat. Caleb stiffens. Not danger, not this time. It's the village. He follows the sound, careful but drawn in, until torchlight flickers ahead. The camp is alive tonight, more than before. Fires burning brighter, voices raised in chant. He lingers at the edge, watching. It's no casual gathering. This is something deeper. Here's a mainstream fact. Many tribes held ceremonies tied to the moon's phases, marking cycles of planting, hunting, and renewal. Caleb has no idea which ritual he's witnessing, but he knows enough to keep quiet, to stay hidden. Still, his eyes find Ayoka. She stands among the women, her face painted with symbols he doesn't recognize, her movements part of the rhythm. The sight hits him like a bullet. This is not the woman who offered him stew by the fire. This is someone larger, someone woven into something greater than he can ever touch. But then her gaze lifts, just for a moment, and finds his. He knows he shouldn't be here, knows he's trespassing on something sacred, yet the connection sparks again, undeniable. Later, when the fire dies down and the camp grows quiet, Caleb waits near the grove where they last spoke. He half expects her not to come, but footsteps crunch softly on the earth, and then she's there. "You shouldn't have watched," she says, her voice low but not angry. "Couldn't help it," Caleb admits, You were something else out there. Ahioka studies him, the firelight of memory still flickering in her eyes. That was for my people, not for you. I know. He swallows, feeling the weight of his mistake, but I won't tell a soul. She tilts her head, her expression unreadable. Words are not the danger. Eyes are. There's silence between them, heavy as stone. Then unexpectedly, she sits beside him. A quirky detail. Some tribes used hand signals as a silent language across distances, more precise than any cowboy's gesture system. Tonight, though, the only language Caleb and Ahioka share is quiet, and somehow it says more than words could. If they learn about us, there will be no laughter. He hears the warning loud and clear. This isn't a story of moonlit dances and happy endings. It's a tightrope over a canyon. Every step, a risk. Historians still argue whether relationships like theirs, between settlers and native women, were acts of love, rebellion, or survival. Some claim they were rare. Others suggest they happened more often than records admit. Caleb doesn't know which side is right. All he knows is that whatever this is, it's real. He reaches for her hand, hesitates, then lets it rest on the ground instead. I don't mean to cause you trouble, he says softly, but I don't regret meeting you. Her lips part as if to answer, but footsteps crack through the night. Both freeze. From the shadows emerges a boy, no older than 12. His eyes widen at the sight of Caleb, then narrow. Without a word, he spins and bolts back toward camp. Ahioka rises swiftly, panic flashing across her face. Go, she hisses. Caleb doesn't argue. He scrambles onto Dusty, spurring him into the night. Behind him, the camp stirs, the faint sound of voices rising, the glow of more torches. As the prairie swallows him, Caleb feels the weight of it all settling in. Their secret isn't safe anymore. Someone has seen. And secrets, once seen, rarely stay quiet. Caleb doesn't sleep that night. He rides until Dusty's flanks are lathered with sweat, until the horizon blurs into nothing but starlight and ache. When he finally stops, the prairie feels colder than usual, the silence sharper. He builds no fire, drinks sparingly from his canteen, and waits for dawn to burn away the edge of his thoughts. By sunrise, he knows one thing. Ahioka is in danger, not because of him, but because of what people believe about men like him. The boy's wide eyes, half fear, half suspicion, are enough to set tongues wagging, and tongues in a village can cut sharper than any blade. Back in the village, Ahioka faces what she feared. The boy, swift and breathless, had run straight to his uncle, a warrior known for his sharp temper. By the time morning comes, whispers ripple like wildfire. The cowboy, the stranger, was seen with her, alone in the dark. She carries herself with dignity, but inside her chest pounds like a drum. When her mother asks quietly, "Is it true?" she can only lower her gaze. Her silence is answer enough. That evening the council gathers. Elders sit in a circle, the firelight etching deep lines in their faces. The air smells of smoke and sage, heavy with judgment. Caleb is not there to defend himself, of course, but his absence doesn't soften the suspicion. Ahioka speaks when allowed. She does not lie, but she does not confess to more than she must. "He is not my enemy," she says, her voice steady. "From a drifter who belongs to no one, you risk shame for all of us." Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the late 19th century, Tribal councils often had to walk a knife's edge, balancing traditions with the pressure of encroaching settlers and government oversight. Every decision, even private matters, could ripple into survival itself. The debate stretches long. Some argue she should be punished, kept close, watched, maybe even forced into marriage with someone within the tribe to erase suspicion. Others urge caution. After all, she is young, strong, and her visions and dreams, though she never speaks of them, have marked her as unusual since childhood. Historians still argue whether councils in smaller bands were more flexible than those in larger, more centralized tribes. Some records suggest individuals had surprising freedom, while others show rigid enforcement of custom. Tonight, Ahioka feels the weight of the stricter view pressing hard against her. After hours, the council disperses without a clear decision. But she knows, every step she takes now will be watched. Every glance could be misinterpreted. Meanwhile, Caleb sets up camp far from the village, but his mind won't rest. He sharpens his knife until the blade gleams. He checks his rifle twice, though he doubts bullets will solve what's brewing. What he wants, what he aches for, is to see her again, to explain, to promise he'll do whatever it takes. That night, a quirky detail plays out. Caleb finds himself talking to Dusty, as cowboys often did when loneliness crept too close. "You'd think I'd have more sense," he mutters, scratching the gelding's neck. "But no, I go mooning over a woman I can't have. What do you think of that?" Dusty flicks his ears, unimpressed. 3 days pass before Caleb dares to circle back near the village. He doesn't ride straight in. He's reckless, not suicidal. But he lingers at a distance, hoping for a sign. And he gets one. At dusk, while the men prepare for a hunt, Ahioka slips away, walking toward the river. Caleb watches from the shadows until the moment feels safe, then steps out. "You shouldn't be here," she says, though her eyes betray relief. "Neither should you," Caleb counters gently. They sit near the riverbank, water glimmering with the first hints of moonlight. For a while, neither speaks. The rush of the current fills the silence, a reminder that life keeps moving no matter who tries to dam it. Finally, Caleb says, "If I've caused you trouble, I'll go. Leave this land. You won't hear my name again." Ahioka turns to him sharply. "Is that what you want?" He hesitates, then shakes his head. "No, but maybe it's what's best." She studies him, and for the first time her composure cracks. Her hand trembles as it brushes the edge of her dress. "I don't want you to go." The words hang in the air, fragile, almost unbelievable. Caleb swallows hard, resisting the urge to reach for her. "Then tell me what to do. Tell me how we make this work." But before she can answer, a splash upstream startles them both. They glance up, hearts racing, to see a figure slipping into the trees, not close enough to recognize, but close enough to know. They've been seen. Again. Ahioka's face pales. Caleb curses under his breath. Secrets, it seems, have a way of finding daylight, no matter how carefully you bury them. The prairie feels different now, less like open freedom and more like a tightening snare. Caleb rides with every sense sharpened, knowing each step brings him closer to exposure. He can almost hear the whisper of that unseen figure in the trees, carrying news back to the village. Ahioka isn't safe, and neither is he. Back in camp, the whispers harden into accusations. Men mutter around the fire. Women trade looks in silence, and children overhear more than they should. The stranger's name, though no one bothers to speak it aloud, hangs in the air like smoke. The council is called again. This time the tone is sharper, more urgent. An older warrior stands and declares, "If she dishonors us, we dishonor our ancestors. This cannot continue." Ayoka's mother pleads quietly for mercy, reminding them that suspicion isn't proof, but suspicion, on the prairie, is often as dangerous as truth. Here's a mainstream historical fact. During this period, Native communities faced relentless pressure from government agents who sought any excuse to fracture tribes, seize land, or remove leaders. Internal divisions, even over personal matters, could weaken unity in ways outsiders exploited. So the council debates not only Ayoka's choices, but the tribe's survival itself. To tolerate her secret meetings could invite shame, but to punish her too harshly could fracture families within. The weight of that paradox presses on every voice in the circle. Meanwhile, Caleb makes a decision of his own. He won't keep running like a shadow. He'll face the village, speak his truth. It's reckless, maybe foolish, but in his bones he knows it's the only way forward. He rides in at dawn, hat in hand, rifle slung harmlessly across his back. Children scatter at the sight of him. Warriors rise, gripping spears and bows. He doesn't flinch. "I'm not here to fight," he calls, voice steady. "I just need to speak." The standoff hangs in silence until an elder gestures sharply. Caleb is surrounded, disarmed, and brought into the circle. He feels dozens of eyes on him, some hard as flint, others curious. Ayoka steps forward, her face a mask of calm, though Caleb catches the tremor in her hands. One of the warriors sneers. "Why do you come here, stranger? To steal? To shame?" Caleb meets his gaze. "Your people. I've no claim on either, but your daughter." He falters, realizing too late the danger of the word. "Your daughter has shown me kindness I didn't deserve. I won't let her stand accused for that." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Ahioka's cheeks flush, but she doesn't look away. A quirky detail surfaces in Caleb's mind at that moment. On the frontier, formal duels were rare, but line duels existed. Two men would stand across a drawn line in the dirt, daring the other to step forward. More often than not, pride decided the outcome before fists or bullets did. Here, though, no line is drawn, but Caleb feels as if he's crossed one anyway. An elder raises his hand for silence. His voice, cracked with age, cuts through the tension. Historians still argue whether strangers can ever understand the heart of a people. Perhaps they cannot. But we must decide not for them, for us. The council withdraws to speak in private, leaving Caleb under watch. Hours crawl by. He sits in the dust, hat on his knees, while warriors circle him like wolves. Ahioka doesn't approach, but her eyes find him often, a thread of connection they both cling to. At last, the council returns. The elder speaks again. "You will leave these lands. You will not return. If you stay, it will mean blood, for you and for her." Caleb swallows, throat tight. He knew this might come. He nods once, slowly. "I understand." But Ahioka's voice cuts through, clear and firm. "And if I choose?" Every head swivels. Her mother gasps. The council stiffens. "If I choose to follow him," she continues, "is that not also my right?" The elder's face is unreadable. The silence that follows stretches unbearably long. Finally, he says, "The path of exile is no path at all. But if you step onto it, we will not chase you. We will not protect you either." The air feels brittle, fragile as glass. Caleb looks at Ahioka, his chest pounding. "Don't do this for me," he whispers, "not unless it's what you want." Her eyes hold his, steady and unflinching. It is, and just like that, the storm breaks. The sun climbs higher, casting gold across the rolling prairie, and Caleb and Ahioka ride side by side for the first time without fear pressing down on them. Their shadows stretch long across the ground, intertwining like the fates that have brought them together. Ahioka adjusts her grip on the reins, wincing slightly as her leg protests the long hours in the saddle. Caleb notices and slows, matching his pace to hers. The wind carries the scent of sage and sun-baked earth, filling the space between them with an almost tangible warmth. For a moment, the world feels suspended. No judgments, no counsels. Much of the American West had transformed with railroads, cattle drives slowing, and towns beginning to thrive. Cowboys still existed, of course, but their days of unbridled roaming were dwindling. Yet out here, the land remains vast and wild, a perfect stage for the unlikely pair. Caleb glances at Ahioka and notices a small braid of her hair catching sunlight, the ends streaked with dust. He smiles, recalling an old custom he once read about. Some tribes wove beads into their braids to signal adulthood or achievements. Quirky as it seems, he wonders if her braid tells a story he'll never fully understand. They speak little, letting the rhythm of the horse hooves mark time. Still, there's an undercurrent of conversation in their glances and gestures. The connection between them has grown beyond words, and yet, neither wants to rush into declarations too soon. Historians still argue whether frontier romances were fleeting sparks or profound bonds forged under extreme circumstances. Here, it feels undeniably profound. A hyena of a coyote howls in the distance, breaking the serene spell, and Caleb can't help but chuckle softly. Well, that's the unofficial soundtrack of danger, he murmurs. Ahioka smiles faintly, shaking her head, amused despite herself. They reach a ridge overlooking a river valley. The sight takes their breath away. The water glinting like liquid silver, herds of deer grazing lazily below. The sky painted with clouds that seem almost to pause for them. It's a rare stillness in a world so often violent and chaotic. Ahioka dismounts, letting her horse graze while she leans against a weathered oak. Caleb joins her, standing shoulder to shoulder, listening to the murmurs of the wind and distant bird calls. Do you ever think about what life could be like, without the expectations? Caleb asks softly. Ahioka tilts her head, thinking. Sometimes, she admits. But then I remember that freedom has a cost. For our people, for you, for me. Caleb nods, understanding the weight she carries. Not just the culture and history she embodies, but the delicate balance between personal desire and communal responsibility. They continue down the river valley, the ride slow and deliberate. Caleb teaches Ahioka a trick or two with the rope he carries, showing her how to loop and pull, a cowboy skill that seems foreign yet thrilling to her. She laughs when she accidentally tangles herself, and the sound echoes across the open plains like music. At nightfall, they set up camp beside the river, the water reflecting the last light of day. A fire crackles between them, and the smell of burning wood mingles with the faint scent of wildflowers along the riverbank. Caleb pulls from his pack a small tin of beans, cooking over the flames, while Ahioka tends a simple stew with wild roots she gathers. The quiet intimacy of the meal, shared under a sky thick with stars, feels revolutionary. Neither has to prove anything here. No counsel, no family judgments, no past mistakes. Only the warmth of firelight, the taste of simple food, and the thrill of being alive together. A hyena-coyote's echo returns, making Caleb snort. I swear they're critiquing our culinary skills too. Ahioka chuckles softly. Maybe they prefer beans over wild roots. They talk long into the night, sharing stories of childhood, of ancestors, of dreams that had seemed impossible until now. Caleb tells her about the tiny ranch he inherited, the dust storms that buried crops, and the quiet sorrow of losing family one by one. Ahioka speaks of the village, of dances under the moon, of sacred ceremonies that taught patience, courage, and respect. Historians still argue whether such stories preserved oral history accurately or were romanticized over time, but Caleb feels no need for scholarly debate in this moment. These stories are alive, whispered between them, shaping the future they now imagine together. Finally, exhaustion takes them, and they lie beside the fire, horses tethered nearby. The prairie night hums around them, a lullaby woven from wind, water, and distant calls. Ahioka rests her head on Caleb's shoulder, and he wraps an arm around her. The warmth of her presence soothes him, grounding him in a way he never thought possible. For the first time in weeks, he feels a fragile hope that love can exist here, even in the unforgiving expanse of the West, that despite differences, despite histories and expectations, two hearts can carve out a space just for themselves, and as they drift into sleep beneath the stars, the prairie holds them gently, a silent witness to a love both fragile and fierce, bound not by law or custom, but by choice and courage. Dawn stretches its first fingers across the horizon, painting the prairie in soft pinks and golds. Caleb stirs, blinking against the light, and finds Ahioka already awake, her eyes tracing the river's edge as if memorizing every curve and ripple. The world feels new again, each breath carrying the scent of dew, sage, and the faint smoke from last night's fire. They rise slowly, careful not to disturb the horses grazing nearby. Caleb hands Ahioka a cup of coffee he's brewed over the dying embers, the bitter warmth grounding him in the present. For a moment, they sit in silence, letting the morning absorb them. The prairie is alive with the chirping of birds, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the whisper of wind through tall grasses. It's the sort of quiet that demands attention, a reminder that life continues beyond their immediate desires. Ahioka breaks the silence, her voice soft but certain. "We can't stay here forever, you know. The world will call us back. Sooner or later." Caleb nods, knowing she's right. The frontier isn't forgiving, and the boundaries between Indian lands and expanding settlements remain as rigid and dangerous as ever. Yet the shared nights, the rides across sun-baked plains, and the quiet moments have woven something unshakable between them. Historians still argue whether such bonds were common or exceptional. But here, under the morning sky, it feels inevitable. They pack their camp with practiced efficiency. Caleb watches Ahioka's hands move, strong and precise, every motion speaking of survival, of resilience. It's one of those quirky details he cherishes, the way she folds blankets with almost ceremonial care, or the careful way she tends to her horse's mane, braiding it in patterns that tell stories he will never fully decode. As they ride, the landscape shifts. Rolling hills give way to denser woods, and the air carries a cooler, earthier scent. Caleb points out landmarks, old rock formations, and the remnants of settlers' cabins, some abandoned, others reclaimed by the land. "Did you know," he says lightly, "that some of these cabins have been here since the early 1800s? Ghosts probably prefer the newer models, though." Ahioka laughs, a melodic sound that blends with the wind. Their journey isn't just physical, it's symbolic. Each mile they cover together strengthens the trust and affection that has grown quietly over weeks. Caleb reflects on how unexpected this connection has been. A cowboy, raised with pragmatism and rugged independence, and an Indian woman, rooted in tradition and ancestral wisdom, finding a shared rhythm in the chaos of the West. They arrive at a clearing with a view of a distant town, smoke curling from chimneys, children chasing each other across fields, and women calling out from porches. The contrast is stark. the frontier's wild freedom against the emerging order of settlement. It's a reminder that love, like the land, exists between these worlds. Fragile, yet tenacious, Ayoka turns to Caleb. "We can make our own path," she says, eyes glinting with determination. "Not bound by anyone else's rules, but guided by what we choose." Caleb feels the weight of her words and nods, his heart swelling with admiration and longing. Together they descend toward the town, the horses' hooves stirring small clouds of dust, the sun climbing higher, casting long, hopeful shadows. The evening brings them to a small homestead on the outskirts of town. They are welcomed cautiously at first, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion in the eyes of the locals. Yet, Caleb and Ayoka's presence is magnetic. There's a quiet dignity in the way they carry themselves, a story that doesn't need to be shouted to be understood. That night, they sit outside the cabin, listening to the familiar sounds of crickets and frogs. @ meta, pause, sex 0.05. The occasional distant laughter of children. They speak of plans, of dreams, and of a life where their differences aren't obstacles but strengths. Historians still argue whether true harmony between settlers and native people was ever sustainable. But here, under the blanket of stars, it feels not only possible, but necessary. A gentle wind brushes across the prairie, carrying with it the scent of promise and the quiet reminder of everything they've overcome. Caleb reaches for Ayoka's hand, intertwining fingers in a gesture that says more than words ever could. They watch as fireflies flicker in the distance, tiny sparks that mirror the flicker of hope in their hearts. The night deepens, and with it, a sense of calm. The frontier, with all its danger and uncertainty, has given them something rare. A chance to love freely, to honor their pasts, and to forge a future together. Every laugh, every shared glance, every moment of understanding is a stitch in the tapestry of their story, a narrative that will ripple across time, unrecorded in textbooks but etched forever in memory. As they finally drift toward sleep beneath a sky so vast it seems infinite, the prairie embraces them, whispering promises of resilience, courage, and enduring love. In the quiet, the world is theirs, not by conquest, not by bloodline, but by choice, trust, and the bravery to follow their hearts.